On September 11th, 2016, it was my 37th birthday, and what better way to celebrate than with some brand new kits? My brother-in-law surprised me with two incredible gifts: a 1 to 35 scale Bell H-13H helicopter and a 1 to 350 scale World War II German Type VIIC U-boat. I've always had a fascination with German U-boats, but I was looking for something compact to fit on my shelf. At 1/350th scale, this one measures just 20 centimeters, about 8 inches long. Perfect for a quick, enjoyable build. U-96 is perhaps most famous for being the subject of the iconic 1981 German film Das Boot, which is based on the real-life experiences of U-boat crews during World War II. The film, and the book it's based on, depicted the intense and dangerous life aboard a German U-boat. I started this kit on April 6, 2017. As always, I like to sign and date the kits I build, but with this one being so small, finding the right spot was a no-brainer with only one viable option. With the two halves of the hull glued together the night before, I moved on to the next steps. I attached the deck to the hull, as well as the bow diving planes and the drive shafts at the stern. I decided against spraying the kit, as I found it too small for that. Instead, I'm trying a new technique where the paint is thinned with thinner to a milk-like consistency. I applied 4 coats of Tamiya XF-53 neutral gray to the upper hull to ensure proper coverage. This diluted paint technique, applied with a wide brush, gives a smooth finish without visible brush strokes. I've applied 3 coats of Tamiya XF-63 German gray to the lower hull. While the color seems a bit darker compared to the box art, reference photos show it's actually spot on. I also installed the hull on the base, which I painted with Tamiya XF-85 rubber black. However, I didn't dilute the paint with thinner, and now I'm starting to regret it, as the brush strokes are quite noticeable. I have a can of flat black spray paint on hand, and am tempted to give it a try to fix the finish. Interesting tidbit: U-96 was a Type 7C U-boat that operated in the Atlantic Ocean during World War II. It was one of the most successful U-boats, sinking over 30 merchant ships and warships. I then painted the two propellers with Tamiya XF-28 dark copper. The next morning I installed them using tweezers, with my 4-year-old son, Andy, watching intently. By April 17, 2017, I painted the deck of the U-96 with a slightly darker gray using Tamiya XF-75 Imperial Japanese Navy Gray. However, I'm not sure it complements the other colors as well as I hoped. Even though I plan to apply a transparent flat coat when the kit is finished, I'm debating whether I should change the color. After debating the deck color for a few days, I decided to remask and repaint the deck of the U-boat. This time, the gray is much closer to the tone of the rest of the hull, just slightly darker than the upper hull. With the deck painted, I moved on to installing the horizontal and vertical rudders. The small scale of this kit is proving to be quite a challenge, especially when it comes to gluing the tiny parts together. On April 25, 2017, I finished detailing the conning tower. I added a touch of bright orange for the life preserver, which was a nice extra detail that really stands out. Once everything had fully dried, I carefully installed the conning tower onto the hull. After that, I added the periscope, making sure it was positioned just right to give the model that final touch of realism. Next, I glued the cannon, railings, and the net cutter to the bow. For the cannon, I carefully painted the top a dark gray, using a toothpick to get into those small, precise areas. I added the decals to the vessel, and I really like how the base stands out. I chose the German writing for an authentic touch. I was initially hesitant about the U-96 blue swordfish logo, as I thought the color was wrong. However, after checking several reference photos, I discovered that the logo's color changed throughout various deployments, so I decided to leave it as is. Interesting tidbit: the Type 7C was the most mass-produced U-boat of World War II, with 627 units built between 1940 and 1945. It became the backbone of the German U-boat fleet during the Battle of the Atlantic. After spraying a glossy clear coat to seal the decals, it was time to weather the kit. With all the rivets along the hull, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to try out Tamiya black panel line accent color. The instructions were a bit vague, so I turned to several online videos for guidance. I used some thinner and Q-tips to clean it up, but unfortunately the results weren't great. Determined, I decided to buy Tamiya lacquer thinner and give it another try. To my horror, I noticed the paint started coming off, along with the decals on the base. Even the glue began to lift, which is why the conning tower and railings are now detached. This was my first attempt at such a weathering technique, and I later learned I should have used Tamiya X-20 instead of the lacquer thinner. I suspect the glossy clear coat wore off during my attempts to clean the panel line accent color, leading to the issues. I've never scrapped a kit before, and I definitely don't want to start now. I guess this will be a valuable learning experience. Interesting tidbit. Did you know that the shortest distance across the English Channel is just 33.8 kilometers, or about 21 miles? That's the narrowest point between Dover, England, and Calais, France. If you lined up all 627 Type 7C U-boats from end to end, they'd stretch over 42 kilometers, long enough that the Germans could have built a U-boat bridge to invade England. Fortunately for me, the base decals came in both English and German. While I preferred the word U-boot, I'll have to settle for submarine if I want to correct the weathering error I made. With the U-96 reassembled, I decided to keep the weathering much simpler. While some of the Tamiya black panel accent color still remains, I didn't want to add more. Instead, I used a Stettler 0.05 millimeter black marker to add hole markings across the hull, and I think it turned out pretty well. The submarine has been sitting on my workbench for a little while now, with only the flag remaining to be added. It's a decal that you fold in two and place over a pole, but it fell off before I had a chance to spray a flat coat. I decided to try gluing this very thin flag to the pole using super glue gel, and to my surprise, it worked. It really adds a nice pop of color to what was otherwise a very bland paint scheme. Interesting tidbit. U-96 was scuttled by its crew in March 1945 after being heavily damaged by depth charges. The boat was abandoned and later sunk by Allied forces. Despite this, the crew had managed to complete many successful missions, and the boat was considered one of the most formidable in the German fleet. On June 6, 2017, I completed the U-96, and I'm glad to have finished another kit. While this is one of the smallest ships I've built so far, I'll admit that the shorter build time of 8 hours and 44 minutes is appealing compared to the typical 30 to 40 hours I spend on larger kits. However, I found it less enjoyable to build due to the tiny parts and lack of detail. Weathering also proved to be difficult, and on a shelf with other scale models, it doesn't stand out as much because of its small size. Overall, I like the kit, but I'd probably prefer to build a U-boat in a larger scale. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has inspired you to pick up a new kit, continue working on one you've already started, or maybe just learn something new. Until next time, keep on scale modeling.